Hi there,
Hello.
everybody, to Theory of Change. I'm Matthew Sheffield. Today we have as our guest Parker Molloy. She's a former writer at Media Matters for a number of years, and she's focused heavily on sort of the methodologies of right-wing media and how they work and why they work. And so we've got a lot to talk about, needless to say. And the first thing on our agenda is to sort of look at the bigger picture and the historical sense. How did we get here? You had mentioned in an article you wrote recently, Parker, at your website, and let me get the URL for that on the screen. Parker is writing now at readthepresentage.com, so be sure to click over to that. But you had mentioned in an article you wrote there, Parker, that you were a big fan of Neil Postman and his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Can you explain that book and who Neil Postman was?
Sure. So I first read that book in college, I think, or around college. I wasn't taking a class for it. I was just kind of bored and nerdy, and decided to do that. But the basic idea behind this book is that the way that we consume news is intertwined with with entertainment these days. And I think that cable news has kind of cable news has taken that to the extreme, to where everything is entertainment. It's people yelling at each other. It's what's the entertainment value of a news story over what is the informational value of a news story. And his argument was kind of this. It was published in yeah. So
Was it
sorry.
80s or 90s, right?
Yeah, it was published back in, I was trying to find, 1985. So
Wow.
it was there. This was before Fox News. This was like, what was it? Right after CNN came into existence. So it really didn't cover the cable news era, and definitely not the social media era, because that obviously did not exist yet. But his arguments were that what stories make it on the air, because of the structure of media generally, will always tend to go towards what people want to see, and not necessarily what people need to see or need to hear. And I think that that's something that has kind of, with cable news and with, the internet and social media, I think that that's something that's only gotten worse with time.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it is endemic to the for-profit model of media, too. So, but let's talk about what you mean when you say what they want to see versus what they ought to see.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, okay, so here's something that we see constantly in coverage of politics. You see horse race coverage. You see coverage where it is, talking about, a candidate said something wrong on the campaign trail, or Donald Trump called someone a name. Like, that would be the focus, and that's what people want to see because it's entertaining. It's people yelling at each other. It's emotional. It makes you feel things. But like tax policy, no. So we don't get policy discussions on TV. We don't get those important. We don't get those important talks that we probably need to hear more of. Instead, we get this infotainment kind of setup where you get attention any way you can. And I think that that's something that, you see it on YouTube and social media all the time, where it's the people who say the reasonable things, the people who say, who talk about things in realistic terms, tend to kind of get buried. But people who say the most outlandish things end up becoming hugely popular. And with that popularity comes money. So you've got all of the wrong incentives set up. And that's just played out everywhere. You've seen it in media. You've seen it move over to, the tech world. You see it in books. It's the way things are, and the way they have been for a long time. And it's just not good.
And in regards to books, we've been seeing that recently with, now that Trump's been out of office, for over half a year now. You've seen journalists who were sitting on, huge stories, and they're all coming out with books. Check out my book. Check out my book. And these are things that actually might have mattered to the public significantly when they were fresh. So, like, just this week we've got a story coming out that's come out from some Washington Post reporters' books, where they have a book where they've said that they knew that inside the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were concerned that Donald Trump was going to try to do a coup to stay in office, and that he was going to invoke the Insurrection Act against Black Lives Matter or against Antifa, and that's and they had to take steps to go to block that. Wouldn't that have been nice to come out during the second impeachment?
That would have been good to know, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what's so frustrating. It's that profit model. It's, oh, I've got this juicy bit of information. Should I report it out and put it in the paper, or should I, maybe sit on it for a few months and hold off until I'm ready to release my book? I mean, those I can see how they could be difficult questions, but at a certain point, there's this need to, what the public needs to know, what the public has a right to know for our own good. And
when they have the right.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw this happen with Bob Woodward's book too, where there's that moment early on where Trump talks about how bad the virus is. He talks about how he thought it was, airborne, and that was when everyone was still wiping down their groceries. And if he had information that it was airborne that far back, that's something we should have known back then, because we were all protecting ourselves in the wrong way. We were protecting ourselves from a virus that transfers from surface to surface, when that doesn't seem to have been the case as time goes on. And it's scarier when it's an airborne virus, obviously. It's because it's just everywhere. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah, well, and also I think if it had early on come out, that Trump knew it was more serious than he was publicly disclosing at that time, I think it would have set a pattern for Republicans, that they would have been more concerned about it, because their guy would have given them permission to be concerned about it. And we're seeing that same thing with vaccines. Like, now we're at the point, because Trump hasn't really advocated much for it. Now, if he were to go and do so, it probably wouldn't make that much difference.
I think it's too late at this point for him to make that difference. Trump could set things in motion. He could get people to care about anything if he starts a message, tells people, tells his side to kind of, to focus on this. They will focus. They will care. They'll care so much. There's still people talking about that hydroxychloroquine drug that he was so hyped up about.
Yeah, and which he himself never used.
Yeah, exactly. It was, it's the greatest thing on earth. I'm not going to use it, and that's what's so frustrating. He's massively influential, but he almost never uses that influence in the name of the public good. And I think that the pandemic is one of those instances where, if he could have put aside the fact that he does seem to view the country as his supporters and the people who don't support him, those as two separate sort of, factions. Exactly. Basically two different nations. It's, had he not taken that approach to the virus, I think he would have, A, it would have been handled way better, and B, he would have won re-election. That's the thing that blows my mind. It was his election to lose. He could have come out and done basically the bare minimum, and it would have been great for him. He would have won re-election, but instead it was, oh, well, it's the blue states that have the virus now. That's where it started in New York and California and Washington and Oregon. These are, those
This
are
is
blue
their
states. That's their
problem.
fault. Yeah. As if the viruses don't spread from state to state. We don't have giant walls at the edge of states. People aren't quarantined in their states.
Yeah.
And he also tried to make it about immigration when it was pretty clear that the virus had been here for a while. And he was trying to just use, the same old playbook, the same old talking points when
and
really,
it was and he was focusing on China, but as it happened,
exactly.
the New York infection, the massive infection they had there came from Italy. It didn't come from China. Well, indirectly it did, but directly it came from Italy. So if you're going to close borders, then you should have done it for everybody.
And it became that sort of it just became another thing where his history of lying and misleading people really hurt. When he says something, you do have more than half the country who hears something he says and goes, well, he's constantly lying. So can we trust him on this? And that was something that did come up as time went on. There were doubts about the vaccine when Trump was very, very clearly trying to get something out before the election because he thought that's how he would win, which maybe he might have, but then you read these stories about how he's been putting his loyalists into positions of power within the CDC. There was an anti-vaxxer who was working as like one of the heads of communications or the spokesperson for the CDC. It's like, how do you have that? The numbers, could we trust them? Could we not? That was one of those questions where it was a time where we needed leadership and we needed, media that didn't treat everything like a horse race. I mean,
or early.
Yeah, well, exactly. And earlier this week, I was, I put out a podcast on my site. I interviewed Joe Walsh, who was a Tea Party Republican elected to Congress in 2010, who went from supporting Trump to not supporting Trump. He ran against Trump in the Republican primary, whatever that really was, for the 2020 election, which was kind of it was kind of a lost cause, I think, from the start, and I think he knew that. But talking to him, it was just one thing that he and I kind of agreed on, because we disagree on policy, but we agreed that one of the issues is the way that we talk about things that politicians say in media. And I brought up the example of this time that Obama went to, this was in 2008, Obama went to, he was talking about rural Pennsylvania, and he was asked a question about how he could reach these rural white voters who don't trust the government, and he was a first-term senator. And so he gives this speech where he's talking about how they've been failed by Republicans, they've been failed by Democrats, and it's time to give them reason to believe in government again, give them reason to hope that things could be better, or at least more competent, or at least care about these people. And it was a good answer, and it was full of empathy and all of that. But then he got to a point where he was trying to say that he understood why people would be distrustful, because they have no reason to trust the government. And he said that's when he made the infamous, it's understandable that they then cling to guns and religion and the Bible. And so that became the entire statement. It's, Obama talks about rural Pennsylvania as a bunch of idiots who don't know any better, and they cling to their guns. And that became the whole story. It was just a soundbite. But what he said made
Was true.
sense. Yeah, exactly. But everyone focused only on the wrong thing. And the same thing happened in 2012 when he was talking about the importance of infrastructure and funding schools and stuff like that. And he said, basically, people didn't make it where they are on their own. We all help each other get there. And suddenly it became, Obama said I didn't build my business. And it's like, that's not what he said, but I get it. I get that these things can be useful in a political context. Taking little snippets of audio and focusing on them. And I don't blame candidates when they do that. I don't blame political parties when they do that, because that's good politics for them. That makes total sense. It frustrates me to no end when news outlets do this, when media does this. That is just, that's what's disappointing. When Hillary Clinton said, she was giving a speech, she talked about how maybe half of Trump's supporters, are sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever. And she goes, lists those off. And then the second half of what she said, but the other half is they're genuinely good people. They are people who you can't just write them off because they support Trump. You can't just do that. They're good people and they need to be heard. And it was very similar to me to that Obama thing that I just mentioned about Pennsylvania, because the headline that came out of that was Hillary Clinton calls Trump supporters deplorables. And we all kind of saw how that played out, where, she said that. And
she said these other things too.
You could have framed that either way, but the focus was, she said that half of these people are bad. And you saw them try to bring this up you saw Trump's campaign try to bring this up over and over, and over on like Fox, they did, where Biden said something like, basically like, maybe 10% of people aren't good, or maybe 15% of people aren't good, but most people are good. And that was his general point, that most people are good and mean well. And suddenly it was, Biden thinks that Trump supporters are evil. And it's like, no, first off, he said like 10% of people. Can we all agree that maybe 10% of the population are bad people? Probably. I mean,
and he didn't even specify party either.
Yeah, he didn't specify party. He didn't specify anything. But it came out and it became this political attack. And same thing when he was speaking to, when he was holding his rallies, and Trump, there would be, a handful, 5 or 6 Trump supporters would show up with like their own little PA system, and they'd try to drown him out. And he would, I forgot what he called them. He was, like those dopes or something like that, or, ignore them. We won't let them, drown us out, something. And that became, Biden calls Trump supporters dopes, or whatever he said. And it's just, we don't learn anything. We don't learn anything from these things. Going into the election, as someone who watches way too much, news, I don't know what Trump was really running on, because he didn't have an issues page on his website. His issues page was list of accomplishments, which I get that that's kind of, when you're running for re-election, it's kind of, I will continue doing the things I've been doing. But why wasn't that brought up more? We scrutinize all of these plans when they're put out by Democrats. You have people digging through, the Green New Deal or what have you. And that's fine. That's all fine and good. But when it came to Trump, it was mostly, well, we don't really expect anything out of him, so we're not going to really focus too much. I mean, his plan to eliminate the debt, the entire national debt, going into the 2016 election, was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the economy. It was based on his inability to understand the difference between budget deficits and trade deficits. Those are completely different. And when he would say things like, yeah, we just have to get rid of this trade deficit, and that will suddenly we'll be above water. We don't need to raise taxes on anyone. We don't have to cut services. We can just do this. That doesn't make sense, but he was kind of given a pass on it. And I think it's out of this sense of, well, we have to make it seem like both candidates are equal going into this. It's a battle of two equally valid ideas, and no one is wrong for supporting one or the other. When really it should have just been, Trump's policies don't make sense. He hasn't put much out there, and whether you agree or disagree with the policies that Biden or Clinton or Obama have or had, they were policies. They were actual.
At least they have some.
Yeah, and that is such an issue. That right now there was a New York Times article that recently came out that was about how boring Biden is, and it compared him to Trump in terms of someone who is not boring. But the reason that Biden is boring, this article said, was that he was talking about policy. He was trying to explain how his plans would work. And Obama was good about doing that, where he would where he would go on these like long talks about policy, and he would explain it in great detail to the point where he would, it was clear he knew what the policies were that he was defending, but it was focused on policy, so people kind of tuned out. And that kind of comes back to this Neil Postman thing, where you've got people who are making editorial decisions, see policy, they see people thinking that's boring, and they tune out, and they go, okay, we're not going to cover that. We're not going to cover it that way. We're going to focus on what people want to see. We want to see them having arguments. We want to see them calling people names and stuff like that. And it happens year after year, election after election. And just today, I tweeted a question to a CNN reporter asking what he's learned from the Trump era and what he would do differently if and when Trump runs again. And I didn't get a tweet back, which is fine. But at the same time, these are questions that need to be examined and explored. And the question of what the goal of media is it to generate profit? Is it to inform the public? Is it a little of both? Because it's not clear. And as long as it's not clear, it kind of clearly is the profit.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it is also that, the reporters themselves they don't know about a lot about policy themselves. And so when people start talking about it, well, their eyes glaze over and they don't want to hear about it. And so, I think that's a huge aspect of things, because they're in it for the gossip. Like, that's what they do. And, they also have to treat these uncredible right-wing blowhards as credible and not tell the truth about them, because they're sources. Recently it came out that Tucker Carlson is a perpetual leaker about Fox News and is constantly dishing about Fox News and also Donald Trump. And by the way, and I can tell you also that Newsmax TV, which is even crazier than Fox, as a lot of people who are watching this know, Christopher Ruddy, who is the CEO of that, he also does the same thing with Donald Trump. And that's why you are not seeing Newsmax covered in the critical way that it should be, as a disinformation scam network. I mean, Newsmax, and I know as somebody who used to work in conservative media, they operate, hundreds of fake newsletters that are basically scams. Like, they're no different than the spam email you get and delete in anger from your inbox, that they're telling people, we can cure cancer if you have enough cinnamon in your life, or and where are the the CNN stories or the New York Times or Washington Post? Where are the stories about Newsmax doing those things? They don't exist. They don't
Right.
exist.
Yeah,
And there's a reason
and
for
that's
that.
such a problem. That is that is this the DC media bubble is kind of, it's one of those things that I think that people on, no matter their political party, there are a lot of people who just cannot stand the DC media bubble. There are a lot of people who work in media who cannot stand that, and who see this like culture of, oh, we're all going to go to these dinner parties and we're going to hang out at a politician's house or at a reporter's house, and it's just kind of seems so insincere. These are serious things being talked about. If journalists want to cover something that has no tangible effect on the world, they should cover something that is fun for them, entertaining, and something that we should know, like, let's say, sports. I mean, sports do have an effect on the world, but at the same time, they're not as consequential as politics. Politics is massively consequential.
Yeah, or go cover celebrity gossip.
Yeah, like if you're a sports reporter and you hang out with someone who works for an organization and your whole thing is just writing about like the scores, that's fine. But if you're covering the White House and you're at these like Sarah Sanders going away party, which some members of the White House press corps like threw for her, that's an issue. That's not the kind of relationship that I think that people working in media should have to people in positions of massive influential power. And you see that happen every year with the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's too chummy. It should never come back. It went away under Trump because of in 2020 because of the virus, but it should never come back. I've been saying that for years. Yeah.
Yeah, it served no purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and and another thing that was interesting to me also was that, as somebody who came out of fundamentalist religion myself, I was raised in fundamentalist Mormonism. And, so I know how it works. I can hear the dog whistle that most people who have never been religious or, had a more regular, normal religious experience, that they can't see it. And so many of the people in the Trump administration, the former administration, they are crazy. And I'm going to put a tweet on the screen that Liz Harrington, who is Donald Trump's spokeswoman, she literally was quoting a Bible curse against people. And here's what she said. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. And then she has the scriptural citation, of course. But, this is crazy shit.
Oh, yeah.
This is the sort of thing that ISIS used to put on Twitter. Quoting stuff in the Quran saying, oh, the infidels are going to be, burned alive and God's wrath is against them. So that's who works for Donald Trump. She worked in the administration for 4 years. And, you look at, again, you mentioned, former press secretaries, Kayleigh McEnany. She has a book coming out now in which the title of the book is For Such a Time as This. And it comes from the myth of Job in the Bible, where, and by the way, most Christians do not believe in the myth of Job, except for fundamentalist Christians. They believe it's a story, but it's in the myth of Esther, and it literally says that Esther, the queen who saved all the Jews from the imaginary extinction that never happened, maybe she was raised up for such a time as this. And so basically, Kayleigh McEnany is saying God wanted me to be the White House press secretary and to lie constantly for him because I am his servant. And whatever I do is God's will. Like, where are the stories about that?
Yeah, it's really worrying, and you know that, and anytime a story does try to touch on this, when Amy Coney Barrett was nominated to the Supreme Court, there was this immediate rush to outrage in right-wing media about, oh well, Democrats are gonna use her religion against her. How dare they? And that was kind of this narrative that just popped up before any Democrat, before any pundit on the left really had anything to say at all. And it was the only thing that was out there were the discussions that were had when she was nominated to a lower court. But it became this thing where it's, you cannot ask about someone's religion. You cannot talk about someone's religion. Their views are, you should not be able to question
It's
these. And it's like,
intolerable.
it's like, if someone's going to be on the Supreme Court, actually, yeah, you should be able to, you should know where someone stands on various issues because it's
Because it's
important.
literally part of their job.
Yeah, it's not just their personal beliefs. It becomes, okay, well, how is that going to fit into our world? Because it's a position of immense power, and that's what always bugs me, because there's such a double standard when it comes to, oh, you can't criticize the religion of of anyone, and that's that, and that applies to Christians who are Republicans. When they're Democrats, suddenly it's, oh, Joe Biden's not a real Catholic. He shouldn't be allowed to have communion. These sorts of things, which I was raised Catholic. I'm not currently Catholic, but it's like, it's one of those things where the hypocrisy bothers me so much because it's so blatant, but it doesn't matter. You can't shame people who do this into better behavior. What you can do is you can hope that the news outlets that fall for this stuff, that pick up these stories of, oh, Amy Coney Barrett's being attacked because she's Catholic or because she's Christian. But when it's someone questioning Ilhan Omar or Keith Ellison, or any Muslim who's been elected to office, these questions come out where it's just, oh well, are you going to try to put your religion on us? It's like, okay, well, if that is wrong, why is that kind of the whole thing that is happening on the right now? And with Liz Harrington, I think it's worth noting that she's not just someone who worked for Donald Trump, and she's not just that. She for a long time would pop up on Fox News, Newsmax, One American News, but also during the election last year, she was the spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. That was their voice. She was out there doing that. That's a lot of the party. I mean, that's considered mainstream for them. And after the election, I wrote a story when I was at Media Matters about how a fake story on a website that was set up to look like a real news site from Wisconsin, but was one of those sites that just sort of popped up. There are thousands of them where they have like a local name that makes it sound like it's a legitimate site, but it's not. And it said, oh, these ballots don't match up, and the count doesn't match, and Biden's numbers were inflated. There's clearly fraud, blah blah blah. And it was just fake. It wasn't based on anything. I immediately looked it up and found the actual numbers. And they were not what that website said. And Liz Harrington was one of the people who took that and just ran with it and shared it on social media. And it went pretty wildly viral for a couple days there. And that is just the lack of ethics and the lack of morals that goes into that goes into sharing false information on purpose and then hiding behind behind Bible verses. Marco Rubio does that a lot as well. And it's such a cheap shot because it's a get out of jail free card for criticism.
Yeah. Well, so how is it? I completely agree. But so how is it that you got interested in all this stuff? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you're interested in media?
So it's so when I was growing up, I didn't have cable. That was a big thing that was frustrating to me. A lot of my friends had cable. I did not have cable, and I couldn't watch Nickelodeon like all the other kids. So I would watch the news every single day, and my parents would come downstairs, and I would be able to kind of just recite back to them everything that happened the previous day, because I would be like, oh yeah, the Cubs won 4-0, and the Sox are on a losing streak, and traffic to the city is, and my parents didn't work in the city, but I would be like, traffic's really backed up, and there was a murder and all of this. And my parents had to be like, you need to stay in bed until a certain time. I think it was 7 a.m. because I would pop up at 5 and I would go downstairs and watch the news, and I would watch NBC, and then I would watch the local Fox broadcast. I would watch the ABC broadcast. And that was just kind of my obsession. We eventually got, we didn't get cable, but we got satellite TV. We got DirecTV. And after that, it was still kind of the same. It was just built into who I was. I really was just interested in that. I didn't watch cartoons. I didn't watch the stuff that other people my age were watching. I would just watch the news. I would watch the Weather Channel. I would watch all of these things that probably are better suited for someone in their like 60s than someone who was like 8. So that's kind of how that started. And then I went through high school, was part of like the AV club in school, and then went on to college, and just was always interested in this and would always write about it. And that kind of, it just eventually worked out to where I was doing just kind of a little blog and places, I was like, oh, I should submit my articles to some places. And so places that would post things for free, Huffington Post, for instance, Thought Catalog, those sorts of places would be like, yeah, sure, we'll put your thing up there. And then it kind of built on that. And I got.
And so now, when did that start? When did you start doing that?
Yeah. The first pieces that I had that went on, anywhere that wasn't a blog, would probably like 2013. But before that, it was, I had a like various personal blogs and stuff that went back to 2002, 2003 sort of things. And so no, I don't have like a degree in journalism, which maybe that helps. Maybe it hurts. I don't know. Because I don't tend to see things in that same sort of formulaic way that a lot of journalists do. And some make it work, but I think it's just such a fundamentally broken system that we have right now in media, where now that we have so many choices, so many decisions to make, so many options, you can find news that matches your existing beliefs, which is good in some senses, but not good in others. It's one thing to it's one thing to see something and be able to learn more about it, and it matches your interests because the YouTube algorithm gets you. And it's another thing when, okay, well, I don't like such and such politician, so I'm going to watch these stories that tell me that politician is bad, and that tell me everything I want to know that is that is good about that politician and will, air lies about the other one and will make me feel better about who I am and what I stand for and that sort of stuff. And that, I think, is just fundamentally toxic. Because that is not how we should learn things. We should not learn things because they make us feel good. We should not learn things because they're entertaining to us. We should learn things about the world because it's important to know what's going on around us. And I think that the fragmentation of media has led to this world where we are living in different realities. We are not working from the same set of basic facts, and that's what you need if you're going to work together on anything. And that's how we end up in this situation where you have a pretty decent chunk of the country that just won't get vaccinated from this deadly disease, and it seems to be purely political. There's no real reason not to get vaccinated if you're able to, and it's just become a political talking point. And I think that was something that going into the election, there was a lot of fear that, oh, well, if Trump wins the election, then Democrats won't get vaccinated. And I don't think that was quite the case. That polling didn't match up, but it kind of speaks to that sense of negative partisanship where it's, well, whatever they're doing, I'm doing the opposite. And some people have been very open about that. There have been some people have written blog posts on right-wing sites saying, I'm not getting vaccinated because it makes the libs mad. And it's like, that's a terrible reason not to get vaccinated.
Yeah, it is. Well, and, just a lot of the reason, though, that there are these different worlds, as people often say, it is because of fundamentalist religion, right?
Yeah.
That's because, if you look at for instance, within the very beginning of the American conservative tradition, William F. Buckley's first book, that nowadays nobody remembers it at all because they just think of it for National Review, but his first book was called God and Man at Yale. And it was literally just hundreds of pages of him telling on various professors because they didn't believe in the resurrection, or they thought Jesus was not divine, or they didn't think he existed. And Buckley was basically saying, look, all you people who are alumni of Yale and are good Christians like me, why do you give your money to these people? The university must fire them. And so, that's how all of this stuff got started. And which is so amazing that you hear people on the right and, this bizarre, centrist, strange, stuff that people like Sam Harris are in now, that they're claiming that there's this massive left-wing cancel culture. But cancel culture began with conservatives. They started all of this by attacking moderate Republicans, by attacking atheists, by attacking, LGBT people, and by, being in favor of segregation. Like the early conservatives were all in favor of segregation for the most part.
Yeah, and that I think it's important for people on the outside to kind of to see this, to see through a lot of the hypocritical arguments, because that's really what it is. Because there will be a person who will say, well, here's an example. The other day on CNN, someone was making the argument, James Carville was making the argument that Democrats need to ignore people who are worried about pronouns and stuff like that, and stop canceling people for using the wrong pronouns and et cetera, et cetera. And that's just not really a thing that happens. There would be people who say, I'm not going to vote for someone who is just openly and unapologetically transphobic. That's one thing. But I don't think anyone's ever been like, you once misgendered a person, you can never run for office, or you should lose your job. Like that's not kind of how that works. And when you look at lists of banned books or books that they've tried to ban, it comes down to most of them are on the list because it's, oh, this had LGBT people in it, or oh, this has, it's how like Harry Potter ends up on those lists where it's just like, well, wizards and that's somehow satanic. I don't know. It's just so hypocritical. And now you have in full force, you have networks like Fox or Newsmax or OAN that will spend one segment yelling about cancel culture, and then we'll spend the rest of the day talking about why critical race theory needs to be driven out of schools, and we'll praise these laws that are limiting what people can talk about in the classroom. And that is just, it's hypocritical. They don't care. And it's something that the audience has to see through, and other people in media have to see through, because these are not good faith, discussions about free speech and open debate and all that. No, these are just tools to get to the end goals, to try to make the country more, culturally conservative, which it's not bad politics. And that's what I keep kind of reminding myself. It's not bad politics. It's terrible news. It's terrible information. It's terrible media, but it's not bad politics. And that's why I really just hope that more people who are watching news and who are reading news and who are working in the news start to see through this. And I think that's kind of, that has to happen. People have to see through some of the bad faith attacks that are put out there.
Yeah, at the very least, the journalists should be doing that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, the whole misgender, false direction. I'm going to put this tweet up here. So I was actually having a discussion with Jenna Ellis, who was Donald Trump's election lawyer, and so I was having a discussion talking to her about some ridiculous thing, how she was violating the Bible where it says to accept all leaders. And I'm not going to bother with a screenshot on that. But I use the word her to describe God. Because presumably the creator, the non-material being who is not doesn't have a physical body, is beyond male and female. And in fact, if you look at most theologians, they do actually believe that. But she got badly triggered by that. And she said, for someone willing to intentionally misgender God, you have no care or belief in what you assert about him. And you're just trying to provoke people. And then rewind just a few years later or earlier, she said to somebody else, I was tracking you until you said you can't misgender because you operate in reality. Have the courage to call a biological man a male. That's operating in reality. So basically, like even on something like that, something where they supposedly believe in not the concept of misgendering is just nonsense. Well, if you call God a female, well then, we're going to come after you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, there's no consistency in these sorts of arguments. There's just not, and it happens all the time. I see people who are like, well, I can't call trans people the pronouns that they want to be called, and people always use these really over the top examples. Like, I mean, like where they'll be like, yeah, I'm not going to call someone Z or, or some other bespoke kind of non-binary pronoun. And it's like, for the most part, that's not really what anyone's asking for. A few people, maybe, a few people, but for the most part, it's like trans women are like, please use she, and trans men are like, please use he, and that's it. It's not asking people to learn like this long list of other pronouns or anything like that. But these are the same people who will go, I can't do that because it's pronouns are somehow tied to biology or something like that. But then they'll turn right around and be like, America, I'm going to refer to the country as she, or the ship as, or a ship as she, and it's kind of like, okay, well, you're more respectful about
A non-living
the
thing.
nations, a big plot of lands, pronouns than you are with, human beings who exist in the world and just want to get by,
Yeah. Well, no, it's true. And the hypocrisy actually, I think, is actually deliberate, in the sense that they don't see truth as so. When you read conservative, especially religious conservative rhetoric, they always are talking about moral relativism and how they're very concerned about that, and that's because they believe they have no concept of the idea that opinions about morals are opinions. They think that their opinions are facts, and they're so concerned about forcing what they think are moral facts that they don't care about any other facts, actual facts. I mean, that's why they literally have all these terms, alternative facts, or truth is not truth, as Rudy Giuliani said. But even go back to not just the Trump years. You had in the Bush administration, George W. Bush. There was this thought that we create our reality, and we create the new reality. You are just in the reality-based community. Remember that phrase? And so, like, that's the point, is that they strongly think that what they believe as opinions are truth, and they don't understand any alternative view.
Yeah, and I think that there's this sense that if you catch people in hypocrisy, that haha, I win. That happened a lot during the Trump administration, when, oh, there's always a tweet. Yes, there was always a tweet, because he's a man who didn't stand for anything. He would bemoan people boycotting something, but then at the same time, as he was running for president in 2015, he had something like 30 or 40 tweets talking about why people need to boycott Macy's because they stopped carrying one of his shirts or something like that. And it was just, it's hypocrisy, but you can't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference to the people who you would hope would go, I guess I am being hypocritical, because
they don't think rationally.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
think in terms of reason. They think in terms of truth isn't something that you can prove. It's something you can force other people to accept.
Yes.
That's what they think. So we've talked about a lot of the problems here. Do you think that our corporate media overlords and the political mainstream media reporters have learned anything? What's your take? I feel to some degree that since they are banning people and keeping them off, like there is some learning going on, but I don't know.
Sure.
You tell me.
I think it's less, are people learning? And I think it's more, what are they choosing to do with what they've learned? Are they choosing to have people on that just go on TV to lie? Are they choosing to cover things with more scrutiny, or do they feel the need to try to reach out to Republicans? We need to be balanced in terms of 50% of stories will be positive and 50% will be negative. And that was something that got brought up a lot during the Trump administration. Oh, 90% are negative stories, or what have you. And of course, 90% would be negative stories, because he didn't do a lot legislatively. He put a bunch of judges on there, but generally speaking, that's not something that gets reported on in the media. In media, we hear about how many judges, but unless you're really glued, really tuned into politics, you don't know the names of judges. I mean, I do, but that my brain is broken. I think that there is always just this tendency to go with, chase the shiny object. And I think that there's always going to be this fundamental conflict between, information and entertainment. And I worry that if Trump runs again in 2024, that it's just going to be treated just the way he was, treated in 2016 and 2020. Just going to give him the same amount of credibility. We're going to pretend that he doesn't have a lifelong history of telling lies. We're going to pretend that he didn't try to overturn the election, because they clearly know better. We saw this happen. We saw it happen after Trump lost the election. You saw this sort of shift in tone on news, where it was suddenly media outlets were more willing to call something a lie. CNN, the morning before Trump gave before Trump gave his speech at on January 6th, CNN had a chyron that said, "Soon, Trump to speak to supporters in desperate coup attempt." I mean, that's crazy. It's like, yes, you're saying it. You're saying what is going on. But had Trump been able to successfully overturn the election, had his efforts to get Georgia or Arizona or Pennsylvania to flip their votes, they would find a way to just sort of normalize it, because there's this normalcy bias in media. There's this, we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make news. We want to just observe it. And the truth is whatever the consensus tends to be. And you kind of saw that play out in like 2000 with Bush v. Gore. There was this, it was this mess of an election, but then you suddenly have where it's like, okay, well, I guess Bush won, and that is that, and he is the president, and we're not going to talk about it again for a little bit, and that was sort of the thing. It was, well, we can't stay focused on that. We got to move forward, and that is always what keeps happening in media. It's, we got to move forward, and we got to not apply the things that we just learned when we move forward. We just going to do everything the same way. So if Trump runs again, you're going to see people, if not Rick Santorum, you're going to see other people like Rick Santorum popping up on CNN to tell lies. You're going to see people like Kayleigh McEnany, all over TV. And it's just going to be there in the name of balance. We're going to treat everything as though there are two completely equal sides. So I don't know. I'm not super optimistic is I guess my point.
Yeah. Well, now what about on the social media company side, where
I think
there seems to have been some progress,
I think that part of that had to do with the fact that a lot of sort of the crackdowns happened after Trump lost. You saw Facebook and Twitter taking tougher stances and stuff like that once he lost, because they didn't have to worry about Republicans wielding their power against them basically as much. So while I think that it's good to see that sort of shift to where it's okay, we'll start holding people accountable for the things that they say and do online. I think that it could just as easily shift right back if Democrats lose during the midterms and you start having House Republicans holding hearings where they're trying to drag Mark Zuckerberg in and Jack Dorsey in to testify for some sort of bias in social media, hearing. You're going to kind of see that succeed in the sense that they'll just go, okay, well, we won't rock the boat either. We'll just kind of back off and we'll try to stay hands off. And I think in the short term, things are better. In the long term, I'm very worried.
Yeah. Well, it's tough to say. I guess, going to the Democrats, Joe Biden seems to have learned a lot more than the media have about how to respond. Because effectively, conservative right-wing, politics is basically devolved into trolling. Like,
Yeah.
they don't have ideas. All they do is attack other people's ideas, and they have no problem getting in bed with very awful racist people, and like Tucker Carlson. I mean, he gets his talking points from white nationalists, and so. But on the other hand, Biden. What do you think Biden is doing differently compared to, let's say, Obama?
I think that there's this. Obama went into the presidency with this idea that people want to work together. People want to make things better, and then we can all kind of come together and we could take the ideas from all these sides. And what he found out was that, Republicans would come together and they would give all their ideas, and then they would vote no on the thing that they just helped build, that they helped make, and they would block things, and they would prevent him from getting judges across and stuff like that. And I think that Biden has shown much more of a drive to get things done faster. He still does this. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to do this outreach. I'm going to try to have Republicans in to, discuss infrastructure and all of that. But I think that that he realizes, hopefully, that what happened during the Obama administration was that they were sabotaged from the start. And that's why it's heartening to see him kind of, endorse the idea of using reconciliation to get things through, which that was something that I remember during the Obama years. There was, to try to get something through during reconciliation, which that was how they applied one of the fixes for the Affordable Care Act. That is the nuclear option. That was something that kept getting brought up, which that's not what the nuclear option refers to. It was if you're bypassing us. But I mean, it's very, very clear that was not a good faith argument. That was just something that they were saying because it was a political tool. And I think that there's some understanding within the Biden administration that they're not going to get a fair shake from Republicans on this. They'll try. But at the same time, I don't think Democrats typically understand media or messaging or communications. Like right now, they should be making a big deal about the child tax credit that's going out, $300 a kid or something along those lines per month. That's a big deal. But where's their messaging on that? I don't know. When Republicans got that tax cut through in 2017, they were taking credit for everything. A company gave employees bonuses. That's the tax bill. Hiring went up. That's the tax bill. They were just applying every bit of good news to this thing that they did. But Democrats haven't really done that with the bill that got passed earlier this year, the rescue bill. And I think that's going to be kind of their downfall, is that they are playing by these rules that they don't understand. They don't understand the messaging.
They're playing a different game.
They're playing a totally different game.
Well, I do think the other thing, though, that they have learned is that Biden, he deliberately doesn't hold press conferences as much.
Right.
And that's by design, because he realized that because Republican politics doesn't have a core that they want to present to the public. Like, they do have ideas, they just don't want to tell you about them as the public, and because everyone hates them, including their own voters. And so, people don't want to go and cut Social Security. They don't want to cut Medicare. They don't want to eliminate the Department of Education. They don't want any of these things that conservatives have been, clamoring for decades. So they basically have decided, well, we're not going to talk about policy at all. And instead, we're going to talk about Obama's tan suit. But guess what? Joe Biden doesn't wear a tan suit, and he doesn't go out and put himself in front of the media and just making stray off the cuff remarks. He's very, very disciplined about that, and it has been very enraging to the right-wing media, actually.
And sorry to interrupt, but that it has been very enraging to them, and you see it play out in these weird little culture war kind of things that right-wing media then have to focus on. They're on day 3 of being angry about Jill Biden showing up on Sesame Street. And and it's like, okay, I guess that's a story. Or when Fox would have the little countdown to, here's how many days it's been since Kamala Harris said she was gonna take over immigration or deal with the border.
Go to the border.
Yeah. Why hasn't she gone to the border? Then she goes to the border and they go, why didn't you go sooner? Or you just went because we told you to go. It's the same exact game that played out when why won't Obama or Hillary say radical Islamic terrorism? That was the thing, as though there was some magical property to those words.
It was an incantation.
Yeah,
if they said it, they would magically go away.
They would get very, very angry when Obama would say ISIL instead of ISIS, which, okay, it's they take what they're given and they work with it. And the Biden administration has not given them a lot to work with. And that is causing them to just kind of throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. And I think that what we're seeing right now is that, you kind of have, they're just trying to invent these sort of controversies. Biden's immigration policies are terrible. Biden's sending people door to door to give you shots. Like, that's another thing that's kind of now it's like, that's not what he said. He's not forcing anyone to get shots. It's an outreach program, which is good. You should have an outreach program for something like this. Make it easy for people if they want. But it's they're working with what they got, and it's not too much. Like when I've never heard a solution offered when it comes to things like immigration policy, other than just we need to close up the border. Okay, and I mean, but Biden is repeatedly said, don't come, stay out, go away, basically. And that's made some people on the left angry, but it hasn't eased. The people on the right haven't changed their tone. It doesn't matter what he does. It's always going to be the same. Democrats are bad on crime. They're bad on immigration. They're bad on everything. They're trying to take your guns, and they're trying to take your guns, and they're trying to make your religion illegal, stuff like all of these sort of things that are just kind of fantasy positions, basically. There are a lot of times I talk to people who are on the left who are just like, man, I wish that Biden was half as progressive as places like Newsmax make him out to be. I wish that he was this raging socialist, but he's not. He's kind of just your replacement level Democrat, which for a lot of people that's what they wanted. They didn't want the soap opera that was the Trump administration, and they didn't want really gigantic overarching policies. They just wanted someone who was in there who would steady the ship after coming out of a pandemic.
Return to normalcy.
Yeah, that was
use that phrase, Calvin Coolidge. Well, so we're getting close to the end here. Tell us about your site that you're doing nowadays, and maybe something you're working on now from a writing standpoint.
Sure. So last month, wow, time is all over the place for me. So last month I launched a newsletter called The Present Age, which is named after the Kierkegaard pamphlet. So, you know,
Yeah, we got the URL. We got the
Yeah.
URL on the screen. So for the audio listeners, it's readthepresentage.com.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Someone already.
But make sure you got the full plug there.
Yes, thank you. Someone already took thepresentage.com. So I will maybe one day try to buy it back from them. But we'll see. So I've got this newsletter where I'm trying to just look at communication, look at discussion, look at politics and media and culture and all of these sort of things as they work together. And I've been interviewing a lot of interesting people for it, and writing some pieces that some would have fit at Media Matters, some would have not fit at Media Matters. And I'm still kind of figuring out what I'm doing with it. But so far I've gotten some good feedback on it. And if anyone watching this wants to go sign up, there's a free option if you just want to get some emails from me, and let me know what you think I could be doing differently, or what you would like to hear from me or see from me. Right now I'm working on something about the anti-vax push in right-wing media. So that's probably going to be my next piece that goes out there, which is going to kind of explore that a little bit. So check it out.
Okay, cool. And you're on Twitter at Parker Molloy, Molloy.
Yes.
And you are a very regular tweeter, so people will find you have lots to say in that regard.
Too much to say.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Parker, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. And for those of you listening or watching subsequently to the live event, let us know what you think. And we're coming back, bringing the show back from audio only and as a live format. So hopefully you guys liked it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah.